probably muted. Cans?
Sorry about that. We were just muted.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear well here.
Yeah. And can Zoom hear us as well?
Yeah, Zoom said yes as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming, everyone. I explained to Mahmood earlier, we're sort of across Zoom and Cairns and Townsville, so it's a bit different to a usual seminar, I guess, where everyone's in the same room, but I'm sure you can manage. I'd like to introduce Mahmood Soofi. He's a research fellow at the University of Göttingen in Germany. He's visiting Australia for some months with the support of a Humboldt Foundation fund, a grant, and CSIRO in Darwin as well is supporting Mahmood to be here. Mahmood is a population ecologist, mammologist, conservation scientist, and has very strong interests in conflict, human-wildlife conflict as well, with a particular, I guess, geographical focus in Iran and the beautiful landscapes there. So I'll hand it over to Mahmood. Looking forward to hearing about your research today. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. And first of all, I would like to appreciate Jane for inviting me here, and I'm happy to present part of my research here. As you can see, the title of my project is Understanding Conservation Conflict and Quantifying Illegal Killing of Wildlife to Improve Biodiversity Conservation Outcomes in Protected Areas. So the outline which I'm going to present is illegal exploitation of ungulates and carnivores, general biodiversity patterns in Iran, quantifying illegal killing of ungulates and carnivores using ranger collected data in Iran. And finally, I'll talk about application of integrated threat theory for law enforcement and conservation. So protected areas across the world currently cover nearly 15% of the Earth, the terrestrial land. And according to CBD, we're still short. And because until 2030, CBD aims to protect about 30% of the landscape across the board, and calls for countries to a protected area to be well connected by 2030 and to be effectively and equitably managed and ecologically to be representative and representative. But all these protected areas around the world experiencing a range of threats, and among them, here I'm presenting overexploitation, one of the biggest threats to protected areas and agriculture, and urbanization, invasion and disease, pollution, and climate change. And all these threats led to nearly 9,000 species to be affected, according to the IUCN Red List. So the poaching here, or illegal hunting, is one of the biggest threats which drives species to extinction or decreasing their population sizes. And all these threats led to a sixth mass extinction of many species, particularly the beginning of the last century. And you can see that the extinction rate rose up, and here the mammals on the top of the mammal or vertebrate groups. So what is poaching? Poaching is a derivative of the French word poche, meaning pocket or to bag something. And in the 18th century, poaching regularly used and defined as unlawful harvest of wildlife, and implying that parts of animal are used. And I would like to also emphasize here the meaning of poaching also has additional meaning, that which is the killed animals are shipped to from country to another country. So it adds to the definition of the poaching. So, and the activity of poaching occurs around the world, conducted by diverse group of people, ethnic group, culture, and socioeconomic backgrounds. So to prevent and reduce the effects of poaching, there has been a range of global efforts. In 1960, CITES formed to conserve wildlife, and later in 1973, the Endangered Species Act also passed, and then later, 3 decades ago, global ivory ban was passed to save these animals. And here, there is always discussed about the interplay between poaching and economy. So economic downturns can escalate illegal killing or poaching of African elephants. By contrast, economic also, if this economic is stable, these conditions are stable, it can lead to increase of animal populations, and it has been shown particularly in Europe for large mammals and carnivores. And so that the economic downturns of or unstable economic conditions of can like unemployment might lead to escalation of poaching activities, and in effect of this unstable conditions, it can lead to the conflict between rangers and poachers, or the people who participate in wildlife, illegal harvest of wildlife. And this photo I'm showing here is actually my friends in southern Iran. They have been unfortunately being just died, and due to the conflict with poachers. So roads facilitates poaching activities. A global review suggests that mammals and birds have declined by 58 and 83%, and this is mainly facilitated by roads, which gives access to inaccessible areas. And recent study also shows that the road networks decreased tiger and prey population by more than 20%. So poaching is hard to detect, and the reason is that the poaching is an elusive and illegal action. So the illegality of poaching makes it hard to detect by rangers, and of course it's costly. And to be effective with the areas, rangers across the areas regularly monitor wildlife and to detect any changes in population, also wildlife crime. Poaching is critical challenge. So understanding causes and effects of it, and difficult to measure it, because it's possible that the poaching might go undetected by rangers. So it mainly due to the illegality and social context, poaching events are seldom detected perfectly and represent a negatively biased representation of the true frequency of events, and due to also variation in socio-ecological factors, which one cannot expect counts of individual poaching event to be unbiased index of poaching intensity. And lastly, absolute poaching assessment methods are often not cost effective, and especially at large landscape scales. So methodologically, have an issue to estimate poaching at large landscape scales. So study area covers across the country. Iran is based in Iran, which is located in Southwest Asia, and 17 countries by land mass, which cover 3 by geographical regions: Palearctic, Sahara Arabian, and Oriental regions. And elevation varies greatly in the country. The central part of the country covers desert areas of plains, which is called Iranian terrain. In the northern part, we have Elborz Mountains, and the west, we have the Zagros Mountains, covered by oak forest. And this variability in landscape system can be seen at different landscape structures. Iran is also home to one of the world's oldest continuous major civilization with historic and urban settlements, and also hunting was a part of the Iranian culture as well, and is center for domestication of the domestic animals such as sheep and goat and other animals. So the landscape in Iran could be expected to see the mountains with cover of snow cover and hot desert, for example, in the center of the country. It has been recognized, found that this is the hottest place on Earth, which is located in the center of the country, and lush temperate forest, which is located in the southern slope of the Caspian Sea. Another landscape, like in the western part of the country, oak desert, oak xerophyllus woodlands, and some plains, and also in the western part, eastern part, we have some structure which is covered by soil. This variation and diversity of landscape leading to diversity of species, of course, and you can see here some species of reptiles, which is native to Iran. And you can see here the marsh crocodile occur in southern Iran, Ebnus viper and Levantine viper, and also spider-tailed viper among these species of reptiles, and some insect as well, ranging from even from temperate system species and also to the tropical species like this, for example, Titesia pucella, Gunopteryx romney, and Pieris reducta, and also some plant species from Crocus, as you can see, and Aris and Fritiraria, radiana, and of course is native as home to native species of mammals like Persian ibex, red deer, subspecies of marral, brown bear, Cossack fox, wild boar, and wolves. And also some ungulate species. Here you can see that chinkara, Gothic gazelle, onagers, mouflon, Persian, fallow deer, and urial. Large cat includes Asiatic cheetah, which is critically endangered, currently less than 50 individuals left in the country. Persian leopard, endangered species in the country, which occur across the country almost. And unfortunately, the Caspian tiger and the Persian lion went extinct since 1958 and 1936. So poaching in Iran mainly targets ungulates. So you can see these are the ungulate species, the target of our study as well. And large carnivores are persecuted and killed due to the conflict with local farmers. And drivers of hunting in Iran or poaching, it takes multiple forms. It could be motivated by financial interest, subsistence, income generation, and pleasure. And of course, also some resentment to park staff. And the picture below, you can see that over 10 horns of the wild sheep hang on the signpost, and just a sign with the hostility towards the park rangers. And so the question in our study was to answer what are the patterns and intensity of ungulate and carnivore poaching in Iran? And second, what role do protected areas play in reducing poaching in the context of socioeconomic and unpleasant, for example, conditions? And three, what is the intergroup relationship between rangers and poachers? So there have been multiple studies that applied some statistical techniques like occupancy modeling, which accounts imperfect detection errors. And however, earlier efforts have heavily focused on inferences based on the occupancy and not abundance. So our target here, main focus was to understand, to estimate the number of the killed animals across the country. And therefore, this abundance was one of our main focus here. So to estimate the animal population, the poached animal population across the country, we fit a mixture model. And mixture model is one of the hierarchical model which takes the counts. And it has two parameters. One is, you can see here, I'm not going into technical details here, but it has been developed by Royal in 2004 and includes two parameters. One is detection probability and another one N, which is abundance parameter. And they jointly work to estimate the counts of the the population. So how we did design the study? So we collected data from ranger collected herbivores and across the country from the Department of Environment, and we also collected, in addition, from media data starting from 2000 up to 2019, and the spatial data also included unemployment rate, number of rangers stationed, road density, and so forth. So we superimposed 20 by 20 kilometers grid cell across the country, and we pulled these data across the country for every respective grid cells across the country. So how we fit and how we generated this model. So this model had the mixture model, a single visiting mixture model is so-called. It has two parameters: detection parameter, a submodel, or abundance parameter. And each of these parameters, we fit unique covariate for each of them. So for example, detection probability, we fit here road and ranger station. For the abundance part, we fit national populated area categories and unemployment rates and ranger stations and ungulate abundances. And you can see here that the observation process, which refers to the detection probability, and ecological process refers to the number of abundance of the poached animals. And eventually, finally, we estimated the poached animal across the country and per grid cell. So this eventually led to the estimation of the poached animal per year since 2010, so over the last 10 years or a decade. And this is also part of the result. It shows that a number of the first panel on the left side, it shows number of the poached animals and compares our true estimate, which is black triangles, and then this brown color indicates the ranger collected data of poached animals, and then the lower gray quadrant shows the observed data by media. And the media, we found that the media reports underestimate by 91%, and rangers collected data 20% of underestimates the poaching intensity across the country. And the second panel here indicates that detection probability or detection of the poaching becomes perfect when the ranger station is within 400 square kilometers across the country. And this shows the dynamics of the unemployment rates across the country and the poaching pattern in relation to the unemployment rate. And this also shows the poaching trends across the country, which indicated with the numbers of the poaching across the country. And this two panel shows that number of the proportion of the animal being hunted according to their populations as in 2018. And we also did fit the model to the same manner to the Persian leopard as well. And the Persian leopard here, we found that over the past 13 years, about over thousands of leopards being killed annually, 32 leopards per year. And the main drivers of the illegal kills of leopards was associated to livestock density, and then wild prey abundance, to the area size, and we found the detection probability becomes perfect at 300 when the road density is 300 per kilometer. So rangers and poachers conflict. So according to our previous finding, so tremendous conservation efforts made in Iran, and thousands of animals being killed illegally. So during all these interactions, 150 rangers being died upon interaction with poachers. And here you can see that most of these interactions and violences did happen during the past decade. So you can see that most of these injuries and death of rangers being associated to armed conflict which led to the injury, and also that the kill, and also the physical violences. So in order to understand the relationship between rangers and poachers, we also did another study by fitting our data into the integrated threat theory. And this theory includes 4 sources of threats, which is intergroup anxiety and realistic threat, symbolic threat, and negative stereotypes. And you can see here better that so every individual might perceive threat or fear from the other individual, and then the fear creates it is an antecedent of the prejudice, and the prejudice might lead to negative context with, and which escalates the conflict between poachers. In this regard, there have been multiple studies carried out, and they applied this approach in different contexts, and they found that under positive interaction between intergroup and outgroup contact, individual might perceive equal status, and hence might motivate individual for better cooperation and common grounds. But it has never been applied in the context of conservation science. So we applied this, and we expected this hypothesis that intergroup anxiety, negative stereotypes, and realistic and symbolic threats would mediate the relationship between negative and positive contact and affective attitudes of rangers towards poachers. Second, we also assumed that the negative contact between rangers and poachers would increase rangers' negative stereotypes of poachers. The intergroup anxiety perceived by rangers, and rangers perceived symbolic and realistic threat from poachers, in turn would exacerbate rangers' affective attitudes towards poachers. Positive contact, which is last our hypothesis that positive contact would have the opposite chain of association with affective attitudes of rangers. So we conducted our questionnaire surveys, semi-structured question, across the 2 provinces in the northern part of the country. And these black dots on the map, you can see that these are the ranger stations where we conducted our questionnaire surveys. And so here, about 83% of the rangers who were invited for questionnaire, they answered and participated in our questionnaire surveys. We fit structural equation modeling to answer our 3 hypotheses. And this is the model which is frequently used in social science because of the capacity and robustness of the model dealing with the causal relationship between different variables. The results of this model showed that you can see here negative contact has positively influencing negative stereotypes personality, and also has a positive effect on realistic threat and intergroup anxiety. And in effect of this relationship has intergroup anxiety influencing affective attitudes of rangers negatively. And also here, the positive effects of negative contact between rangers and poachers leading to negative effects of stereotypes to affective attitudes of rangers. So we found in our 2 case study, we found that the unemployment rate in Iran is the most factor driving the ungulate poaching across the country. And unemployment, that means simply it's mostly is caused by the international sanctions, which is made many of these local people out of work, and they rely on natural resources. And the poaching tends to increase and that led to the more poaching of many of the ungulates. And here, we found that 41% of the gazelles were captured or poached along the roads, and so road facilitates the rate of poaching. And poaching was commonplace almost everywhere inside and outside of the reserves. But most of the category 5 was more affected by poaching, which has the less ranger stations. Ungulate poaching also detectability, we found that 4 ranger stations is enough to have within 400 square kilometer to increase the detectability of poaching. And each ranger stations include at least 3 individual of rangers. So we conclude that we need two-pronged strategy to prevent and to reduce the poaching rates. So law enforcement is essential. However, it must be combined with establishment of multiple community-based livelihood, particularly in provinces that they suffer from high unemployment rates. And we also found that the single visit year stratified and mixture model is one of the powerful method and very useful method to estimate poaching intensity at large landscape scales. And we also found for the third case study about the relationship between rangers and poacher, intergroup anxiety and negative stereotypes of rangers are likely to mediate relationship between negative contact and affective attitudes of rangers. And we also conclude that existing violent conflict between rangers and poachers can't be removed and reduced only with enforcement. Therefore, we need positive interactions to facilitate the interaction between rangers and poachers, so that to reduce the intergroup anxiety between these two groups. And one practical pathway that we think that might help this relationship is to train rangers in the social psychological skills, enhance their ability to communicate properly, particularly in the difficult situation when they encounter in the park. So this is the last but not the least. I would like to appreciate and thankful to all these mentors and my friends and colleagues in Iran as well, who really helped me during this project. Chris Pavey, my mentor in Darwin, and Matthias Walter from Göttingen, Andrew Royal from USGS Patuxent, and Jane Addison here, and Stephen Redpath in Aberdeen University, and my Iranian friends who really supported me. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mahmood. We might start with Zoom. Are there any questions on Zoom? Yoko, you're able to help us with that?
Yeah, so far nobody yet.
Okay, what about cans?
We having cans? Not yet here.
Oh yeah, people still digesting? Questions in Townsville? Yep.
Thank you for your last presentation.
No worries.
I'm also working more or less similar to yours, but not necessarily like that issues. Addressing the conservation conflict, especially the poaching and the killing of wildlife by local people in Iran. Like, is there any connection of this poaching to the international level or the national level, or the same people because they are angry with the park rangers or the wildlife from the national park destroys the livelihood, for example, destruction of livestock or crop? Because if I put my example from Nepal, the poaching exists, for example, a rhino, not necessarily purely by the local people, but they are mobilized by the people somewhere living outside of the local community, but they mobilize in some camps and kill from them. So giving the example from Nepal, how particular situation.
Right. So according to the definition of the poaching, I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, so the poaching in Iran mainly motivated with the income generation. So most of the poaching is to fit the family needs of the basic needs of the family. And the animal are poached, particularly ungulate, they're not shipped to outside of the country. And mainly used from locals to the biggest cities in Iran. That's the one thing. And then the small portion of the of this poaching race related or associated with hostility, but it still exists, and so we can't ignore it. And also that there's also, because of the historical connection, many of Iranians are used to hunt in the past centuries, so that it includes some level of pleasure during all the process. So it's a combination of different factors leading to this activity. I guess it's slightly different from, for example, ivory for medical use or something similar poaching, but this mostly done for just for meat, for example, and to some extent also some trophy of the horns and something, but not, they don't particularly go for trophy of the horns.
I might ask a question, Mahmood. Yeah. I was curious when you were talking about hunting pressure in different areas of Iran. Obviously, Iran has been subjected to various kinds of sanctions from the US and other countries. And that would, I'm imagining, would have significant economic impacts. And I'm wondering, do you think there's a sense that hunting intensity is being intensified by these international sanctions?
Yeah, I think, from my opinion and my understanding from the system I am working, is that the unemployment, we found that one of the main reasons, and unemployment is actually associated with the gross product of the country. So that the imposed sanction led to the huge decrease in currency level of the country. So there's a huge gap between the US dollar and also Iranian currency. And that led to the increase in the common goods. So people are just, first they're out of work, and the goods and what they need for their basic needs of the family is just really expensive. And that leading to giving more perspective to hunt more animals. And then when they sell the animals, it actually is associated with the black market. And the black market actually linked with the changes of the currency of the US dollar and not the Iranian currency. And that leading to this intensified rate of poaching across the country. At the moment, we are actually working on this parameter, on this covariate, how we can relate the increased rate of poaching to the changes of the currency in the country, or the effects of inflation level in the country.
Okay, thanks. We have one question from Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Peyton?
Hello. My question was, if you're seeking to reduce negative interactions between poachers and rangers, I feel like it's a lot easier to approach rangers and kind of discuss how you want to go about trying to resolve these issues. How do you go about expressing these wishes, like, to poachers without hostility?
So, if I understood correctly your question, so that means you mean that how I approach rangers to ask questions?
No, more like, how would you go about expressing these problems to poachers, like how you're trying to maintain positive interactions between the two groups? So how do you seek to mediate that by only working with one side?
Right, that's a good question. Actually, up to now, we were able to only ask questions from rangers. and which took us quite a lot of time to cover all this range. And the next activity will be to ask the same question from the other group, which is the poachers, and understand in both ways to understand the views of poachers towards rangers. Yeah, and that would be the next step, which we are planning to do that.
Thanks. We have one more question from Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, so is it more feasible to illegally poach ungulates for the people that are doing it for subsistence than to raise livestock, or does unemployment make raising livestock unrealistic?
Can you repeat your question, please?
So is it more feasible to illegally poach than it is to raise livestock for subsistence, or does the vast amount of unemployment make raising livestock unrealistic?
Right. So people simply in Iran, mostly in the local people, they have a range of activity to earn money. For example, they do some agricultural cropping, or for example, farming, and also a little bit of keeping. For example, they keep few livestock, and a little bit of piece of land. They plant some crops, and also it depends on the individual level. So if they have the poaching, is it kind of it requires skills. So if you don't have the skills, then you can't do hunting, because hunting is costly. If they go for hunting, they will be captured and will be fined or jailed, and it's really intensive interaction you might expect. And the price, so that if the people who have a high level of income, they don't really participate in illegal wildlife, taking from the wild. And usually the people who have a lower or moderate income, they usually participate in wildlife hunting or poaching. And and it's also taking from the wild for the skilled people is much easier to work with livestock or crop, because they having crop and from income from agriculture and farming is also costly due to the climate change, and they don't have a really much high income, those people who live close to the parks. Therefore, they culturally used to hunt, and due to the effects of this rise in unemployment and rising prices, they hunt more frequently than the previous years. For example, they put perspective to buy a car, so then the car would cost, for example, 5,000 euros, and then they said, I need to hunt 5 individual of red deer or urial to reach to that target. This is the way how they put perspective, and of course it's costly because it's dangerous situation. And the graph I showed you about the injuries and death of rangers, the same thing happens for the poachers as well. Since I haven't had the data, a reliable data for poachers, I was unable to present for that side. So this is quite a similar experience they have, both sides. I'm not sure whether does it answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Jenny, I think we finished from this end. Do you have anything else?
We've got one more question in Townsville, Brock.
So really fascinating how you approach this in a multifaceted way, right? Starting with data and then starting to build on. I had kind of 2 questions. The first is, you mentioned that people have used this, the inter-threat theory before. So why specifically did you settle on that one to examine kind of interactions between the enforcers and the people being enforced? And secondly, when you're going out to start discussing or having these surveys with poachers or potential poachers, have you looked at or thought about including anything else about kind of more of the motivations or pulling a bit more from like the social psychological realm of decision making? Because obviously it sounds like right now the picture is very economic, right? Like very economically motivated. Poachers are going out to supplement their income, doing a risky behavior because they have no other options, essentially. So it'd be really interesting to know how they're perceiving the threats of detection, the threats of injury, and how they're kind of making those decisions based on that, and whether they actually see a risk of being detected or caught or fined.
Right.
So you can kind of describe the picture from their point of view a bit more.
Right. So our questionnaires basically included two theories. One was related to the integrated threat theory to understand how the level of perception of how to what extent they perceive threats from poachers. We also asked question in the framework of theory of plant behavior theory. So we asked specifically how the individuals or rangers make a decision for particular situations. So that, for example, what drives them to go capture the poaching if the threat level is high, if the situation is really risky, because they have all both sides, they are equipped with the guns, and if they encounter the risk is high for really intensive physical violence and shooting towards each other. So in this case, we tried to ask what drives you to capture, and what is the motivation behind? We have asked such a question as well, and actually this part is in the process of analyzing the data. So determining the motivation of rangers who engage in the very difficult situation to capture poachers, and we want to ask the opposite from poachers towards the rangers as well. Yeah, this is a good question there, right?
Sounds great. You've read into what you're already doing. Capture it perfectly.
No worries.
Thanks. We have one more question from Zoom, friends.
Yep.
Go ahead, Zoom.
Hello.
Are you muted, Zoom?
I might just read out the question on behalf of Francis. Francis says, thank you for sharing your study, Mahmood. How do you envisage your findings being used in nature? I'll restart. How do you envisage your findings being used for nature conservation in Iran? In other words, what is your wish for how your research could be used by practitioners and or policymakers?
So whether I correctly understood your question, simply I'm connected to, since my father was ranger and my two brothers are rangers too, and I'm deeply connected with, familiar with both groups of poachers and rangers, and from local rangers and also to the department in Tehran. So whatever I get from papers and my results, I share immediately and translate the outcome of the research in Persian, and I share with the department environment. Either I do, sometimes I tend to share the results via webinars, and this is what I did during the past several years, and also give a report to them, and I reported how we can reduce the facilitate the relationship between these two groups, and I'm not expecting that they could implement immediately. It will take some significant time, but at least if they start like training them and putting some improve the skills of this group, it would help or initiate for supporting this the communication, and also that the poachers or hunters in Iran, they don't have association, so there's no any hunting association for them, so they are just a sidestepped and rangers receive more support, but not poachers. So they feel they are sidestepped, and they have a more intention for conflict. And therefore, I was suggesting that we need sustainable wildlife management to target those individuals of poachers who are really in need of hunting of wild sheep or any other animal that they tend to hunt. I'm not sure whether if I understood correctly your question, but I tried to go around. You may ask.
Can I just make one more quick comment?
Yeah, we've got one more comment in Townsville.
So I think kind of what you're getting to is something that I've heard throughout the world as far as complaints everywhere, like around how enforcement happens. And I think what you're highlighting here is very important, which is the way in which that interaction occurs is incredibly important for future compliance behavior or not. Right. So like thinking about the kind of, in other terms, they might call this procedural justice or fairness, legitimacy, that kind of stuff. And so essentially incorporating that into trainings and realizing that these enforcement officers are essentially liaison officers for the entire, department is very key and often overlooked role that they're playing, right? And so I've heard that in fisheries contexts throughout the world and in other areas as well. So I think what you're kind of doing here is really well placed and will have a lot of impact on the ground.
Thank you.
I think that might wrap us up. You okay?
Yeah, it's fine for us.
Thanks again,
No
Mahmood, and thanks for everyone for coming in Townsville. You guys know Mahmood's going to be around for another couple of days, and we should have coffee, Brock, and just further discuss some of those ideas.
I'm looking forward to talk to you.
Thanks very much for hosting, TESS.
Thank you.
That was great.
From Ken's here. Can you take your number?